All right. How to spot the guy who wasn't at the parties last night. All right, so thanks for coming. It's sort of a little last-minute thing, but I'm Mike Kershaw. I wrote Kismet, some Wi-Fi injection stuff, Lorkhan, and various other things. I've been peripherally involved in helping with the Metasploit project with some Wi-Fi stuff and some other good stuff with that. So this is going to start off less depressing. By the end of the talk, you'll probably be very depressed. Wi-Fi networks, moving all the way down into attacking layer 7 from layer 2 directly. So 802.11 networks are 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz. They use multiple data encodings depending on the spec, but they're all fundamentally spread spectrum. It means we can interact with them really easily. Bluetooth is hard to interact with. Wi-Fi, you need a $15 card. So unlike frequency hopping protocols, it's trivial to capture 802.11. Generic Wi-Fi cards, the Alpha 11G card from Amazon is $50. It's a good card to start with. As long as your OS supports it, you're good to go, and that's all you need. So 802.11 networks, just to give everybody a bit of an overview before we delve into how to actually mess with them in fun ways. Three main packet types, management packets, kind of control the network. They go, I'm a network, this is my name, this is my crypto, come talk to me. There's CTS and RTS packets that control when a client's allowed to speak or expected to speak, power save. They're not very interesting. And then the data frames where all the rest of the good stuff lives. So management frames define the network. They beacon about 10 times a second. They control client access. They control things like I want to join a network. Network goes, you're allowed to join. You're not allowed to join. They're not authenticated. They're not encrypted. Yeah, that's a good idea. So they're going to seek to address this in the future, but the standards still haven't been fully ratified, and they'll require updating everything to do so. Data frames contain, surprisingly, data. They might be encrypted. It might have layer 2 encryption like WEP or TKIP or AES. It might have data layer encryption, SSH, VPN, whatever. All that's optional. If you're on a Starbucks network, it's all open unless you encrypted it. So monitoring Wi-Fi. Normally they present as 802.3 Ethernet devices like they were wired, wired NIC. Promiscuous doesn't really work the same since Promiscuous defines that an 802.3 card stops filtering MAC addresses, but on Wi-Fi it doesn't directly adapt, and your OS will do funny things. So you'll only get data frames, you won't get management, you'll only get some data frames, you'll probably only get data frames destined to you if you just turn on promiscuous mode, like if you just fire a TCP dump on a Wi-Fi interface. So there's an alternate mode, monitor mode. It's a special mode, it needs support in the drivers, but it switches the interface to an 802.11 link type, so you actually get raw 802.11 packets and packet headers. You sometimes get custom headers on top of that for signal data, like what antenna, signal power, etc. It does require support from the drivers and firmware, but almost every driver in Linux supports it. The airport drivers in OS X support it to a fairly decent extent, and there's some specific devices you can get for Windows to do it. So it shows all the packets seen by the radio. That includes the management packets, the data packets, everything from every network in range of you. That's on the channel you're on. Almost all cards support this. There's a few notable exceptions. There's a few mobile chipsets that just don't have it in their firmware, or they have a binary-only firmware blob that gets loaded by the OS that doesn't include monitor mode. They just removed it to save space and because they want to be bastards, I guess. Almost all the Linux drivers, almost all the BSD drivers, and on Windows there is one open driver, which is the AirCAP driver, which they actually designed to allow open source authors to write stuff against. Unlike all the other stuff where it's commercial demos of commercial sniffers that people hack the drivers to kind of work with other things. And I don't like getting sued, so I don't really acknowledge that that's a feasible alternative. But the AirCAP device is a physical device that you buy from Case, and it comes with the Windows drivers that do monitor and inject. So we get all the packets. It doesn't matter if they're encrypted. We get the encrypted data. It doesn't matter if people try to hide the network. We'll see it if it's talking at all. We can see clients talking. We can do layer 2 IDS by capturing all the packets that way. We can do completely passive observation, and we can collect all the data for offline encryption attacks. So, your crypto might not, fall in the first 5 minutes, but if I've got enough data to crack it, I can spend a week on it. So the packet format you get, 802.11 headers, which are unencrypted. The length of the 802.11 packet varies a little depending on the type of packet. Management frames are all 802.11 header. There's no real data in them. Data frames have the headers and optionally encrypted data. When it converts to 802.3, they do an address conversion. So 802.3 have source and destination MACs, and that's it on your wired Ethernet. 802.11 have 3 or sometimes 4 MAC fields, the source, which is the client or the AP talking, the destination, which is the client or AP it's going to. The MAC address of the network that the communication is going over, and occasionally if you're using like some sort of mesh network, you have the MAC address of the AP that you're forwarding a packet for. So multiple AP, roaming is multiple APs with the same network name. The client assumes the network name is a common network. Everything named linksys must be the same network so it can peer between them with no problem, whether or not that's true. It picks the strongest signal automatically. The client just kind of goes where it thinks is best. Data handoff is the responsibility of the back end. If you have a controller, like a managed enterprise network, it handles the handoff and preserves your packets. Otherwise, you just lose packets till you reconnect. The only differentiator is the MAC address. So finding 802.11 networks is really, really easy. They're really, really noisy. They beacon 10 times a second. Even weird networks that try to hide themselves and don't beacon, they make noise as soon as someone joins the network and talks. You can't hide a Wi-Fi network if you're on a channel I have hardware that can see. Clients are constantly looking for networks to join, and they'll usually tell us every network they'd ever like to join. It's just as easy to find them as it is to find the networks. And they're really noisy when they can't find a network because it'll just, Windows will sit there and go through the list of every network it's ever connected to and go, are you there? So you just put the card monitor mode, requires an OS with monitor mode drivers. If you don't have one, you could just use Backtrack or Pen2 live CDs, fire up Wireshark and TCP dump. Kismet does all that for you already. So moving on to the actual interesting stuff, now that we have a bit of a background. We've got a pretty good idea about 802.11 security by now. And by we, I mean the security professionals. Everyone in the room should have a pretty good idea about, you need to secure your APs. You don't just run an open network at home, et cetera, et cetera. Even the great unwashed are kind of cluing in a little bit. In general, the encryption percentages on networks just around are up. A couple years ago, it was like 5% were encrypted at all. Now it's probably 20% are WEP and about 20% or 30% are WPA. It's actually getting a little bit better. So Wi-Fi is secure in proper deployments. WPA Enterprise with per-user authentication, per-user keying for the encryption, mutual authentication via certificates, you can do Wi-Fi securely. We've got a pretty good crypto system. WPA CCMP is as yet unbroken. TKIP's showing flaws. They said it was going to be good for about 8 years. It's been about 8 years. It's beginning to fall down. This is okay. Move to CCMP. Move to WPA2 with full encryption. You'll be okay. WPA Enterprise is secure if you do it correctly. Opportunities for failure exist. If you allow the users to look at assert themselves and decide if it's a good idea, your user is probably not going to decide it's a bad idea because they want the internet, as Josh proved. TKIP will eventually fall. At some point, it will be cracked as badly as WEP is now, I'm sure. So AP defense. We've been doing AP defense a long time. We know how to do this now. It's not that interesting anymore. Best defense is a strong network again. WPA, done. Yeah, people can DOS you. Big deal. You have an IDS overlay, so you can monitor for conflicting spoofed access points. You can do client protection, so you know this user was valid on your network. Defend them when they join a hostile network. It's not that hard to do. Inter-client traffic can be blocked at the AP. Defending clients on a strong network is easy because every client has their own crypto key, which means you broker all their communication between each other. It's easy. Defending clients on an open AP, on the other hand, is incredibly difficult. So when you have a strong AP, you still have some denial of service attacks. Management frames are unprotected. Spoof the AP, tell the clients go away, or just flood the channel with garbage and everything falls down. Really, only defense against that's a crowbar. You take a crowbar, you find the people doing it, you hit them with the crowbar, and your network starts working again. This is how we do it at conferences usually. But denial of service isn't that interesting. They don't get data from you. They just mess with you, and then you hit them with a crowbar. So messing with 802.11 is really absurdly easy. Again, management frames are unprotected. Open networks are unauthenticatable because there's no authentication or protection on them. It's all shared media because it's all in the air at the same time. Avoiding nasty networks requires smart users. Users aren't really that good at making smart decisions. The operating system doesn't help you. I've seen links before. I'll join that and get an IP. That's a great plan, assuming the user even knows what to look for. Users like free Wi-Fi. Who wouldn't want to join a network called free public Wi-Fi? One time this probably existed as a real network, but there's a bug in Windows for many, many years where it goes, I can't find that network. I'll make it into an ad hoc network and let other people join me. That must be the proper action to take here. So someone else joins the ad hoc network, and now free public Wi-Fi is in their favorite list. And then Windows goes, I can't find this network. I'll make another ad hoc network out of it. Of course, it doesn't go anywhere, because it's stupid. Of course, I could bring up an AP called free public Wi-Fi and start handing out IP addresses, which would give me LAN security domain access to your system. No one would ever do that, though. I mean, who would think to do that? Clients are really, really trusting. You can't authenticate an open network. If you say you're foo, you must be, right? I mean, it's really hard to avoid bad behavior because roaming looks exactly like spoofing a network. Multiple APs with the same network name. Client assumes the network is a common network that you can roam between, picks the strongest AP. The rest of the network doesn't do anything but handle the packets moving over, and the only difference is the MAC address. How many of your users do you think are going to understand how to look at the MAC address of your AP in the network list and figure out if they're connecting to the legitimate one? All right, just pick the strongest network. So if attacker has a stronger radio than the access point, you're probably not talking to who you think you're talking to. As long as the packet goes through, the user will never know. I can check my email. It must be fine. I win. So, you know, two interfaces. One connects to a real network, forwards packets through, connect to a cell phone with EVDO or whatever. The other one provides free public Wi-Fi or, you know, a network that rhymes with Fardux or whatever. But it sounds really boring to have to make a fate network for every client, and not everyone is looking to join free public Wi-Fi. I mean, almost everyone, but not quite everyone. So we have Karma and Airbase, which go answer all probe requests. I'm an AP. Are you free public Wi-Fi? Yes, I am. Probe response. Network is valid? Come on in. Are you my corporate network? Yes, I am. Request is valid. Come on in. When you're the network, you're the internet. I don't have to own the internet. I have to own your internet. Yes, this is a valid network. Here's your IP. You want to connect to IMAP? Of course you can route to that IP. Log in. You wanted to update Java? Of course. That's not signed. Here's a new update file. Run that as sysadmin. There's a utility called EvilGrade, which actually makes a database of all of the software tools that have updaters that aren't using proper signatures to validate. And you can just bring up a site that provides software updates for everything on a user's system to install as admin very happily. Please log into Twitter. It's a great plan. That's obviously, it's really Twitter. I mean, it's got the image and everything. It's got to be the real Twitter. Log in. Let's make a bad thing a little better. Metasploit. Metasploit plus Airbase plus a massive evil attack framework and a client hijacking system. You wanted Facebook? Here's a face full of browser autopwn and all the exploits that we have. Just shoved down your throat instead. Many sites encrypt the login, but not the session. Gmail was guilty of this until very recently, where you'd log in, sure, your password's encrypted, but now your cookie's not. And all that I need is your IP address, which I have because I'm next to you, and your cookie, which I have because you just sent it in the clear, and now I have your email, which I'd also have because I watched you reading it anyway, but now I can log in as you. But all these are still kind of boring because they're really obvious. You'll probably get users. They'll all work. They're great. But it'll be really obvious. If someone is looking, they'll see another AP come up and start screwing with their network. I think points are awarded for style and stealth. So wait a minute. Didn't we say 802.11 is shared media? Yeah. We found the best time machine ever made. And it's not a hippie do-gooder time machine. But it's one where we get to go to the future and bring back awesome weapons with us. So with bad old days, hair metal, grunge, ripped jeans, unswitched Ethernet, sniffing the entire segment, TCP session hijacking. Renderman and I gave this talk in Poland, by the way, and I went to hit this slide. I'm like, remember the bad old days in the 80s and grunge metal and ripped jeans? And oh no, it's communism. I can't show this slide. But it'd never be that easy, right? I mean, people have to have gotten smarter about it now. People would not make all the mistakes they made in the 80s and 90s with shared media networks. You'd never take a system from a secured internal network to a completely insecure shared media network, would you? Oh, you would. So, remember, management frames have no protection. Open networks have no client protection. Nothing stops us from being the AP and talking to the client as if we were the AP. So you can try to filter inter-client stuff on the AP. And it works good if you have an encrypted network. It doesn't work so good if you don't, because, okay, client A can't talk to client B. Too bad I'm the AP talking to client B now. Can't filter that. Just generate an 802.11 header where the from MAC address is the AP, the to MAC address is the client, and, oh, look, the client thinks the packet is legit. There's no way that the AP can stop that from happening because you're spoofing the AP. And we can communicate directly with protected clients because they're not protected because it's all crap. So most modern cards now use soft MAC layers, where all of the control of the Wi-Fi stuff and the packet creation is offloaded to the OS. Older cards like the Prism 2 and whatnot, the early 2000 cards, had all that stuff in the firmware, so you couldn't do really fun packet creation because when you tried to put it in there, the firmware went, oh, I know how to make that packet, and overrode everything you did. So only certain timing critical stuff is handled in the firmware, sometimes not even that. And that means we can send anything we damn well want, usually. Unfortunately, there aren't any real standards for injection. Every operating system does it differently. All the drivers do it differently. Sometimes you need custom headers on the packets and all that. So Josh and I went, hey, writing the same code over and over again really sucks. Writing custom code for every driver sucks. Writing custom apps for every OS sucks. So we made Lorkhan, which unifies all the packet injection. Unfortunately, the API kind of sucked. So we redid it. So there's a new API that's modeled off PCAP. It's designed to be super, super easy to use. C, Ruby, someone's working on a Python API. It'll soon support all the cards Lorkhan 1 did. For now, it supports the kernel drivers in Linux and the Mad Wi-Fi drivers. The URL will be at the end of the presentation again. So it's super simple. It automatically determines the driver. It automatically configures virtual network interfaces for injection. You can send arbitrary bytes, or you can build packets with a little simple packet creation API where you go, insert these fields, make this type of packet, do that, add the checksum, go ruin someone's day. So, I mean, it really is this basic, and this is the C version, not the Ruby version even, where you just make a driver, identify or find the driver for the interface, create the context, open it in monitor inject mode, set the channel to channel 6, and send a whole bunch of crap. Done. That's all you need to do, Depending on what your payload was, that's a network DOS right there. So the inspiration for all this, Wi-Fi session hijacking. About 5 years ago, Toast debuted AirPwn at DEF CON. It was TCP stream hijacking on 802.11. This is the most awesome thing ever, and no one noticed, and everyone forgot about it. And it's not just for shock porn anymore. Think about it, and if you don't get it, I'm sure the person next to you will be happy to explain it to you. So, rerouting TCP streams. It's a typical layer 2 attack. TCP is only secure because the sequence and ACK number aren't known. If you're unencrypted and I'm on your shared media network, I see your sequence and ACK numbers. Any TCP stream is subject to abuse. So what does it look like? SYN-ACK, blah, 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 handshake. Client goes to the server, says, get this web page, sequence number, whatever, ACK number, whatever. Server says to the client, here's your headers, here's your content, here's your sequence number, here's your incremented ACK number. So let's add this to Metasploit, because that's a good idea. Let's take something terrible and add it to something really awesomely terrible. So there's a Ruby wrapper. Uses Racket for packet assembly. It's high-speed packet assembly in Ruby. Ruby PCAP and a little loving care. And you get Metasploit. So the anatomy of the evil session would be handshake. Client says to the server, get this, the numbers. And the Metasploit says to the client, here's your data. And the numbers line up. And end that connection. You're done. And then it says to the remote server, and end your connection. The client went away. You're all set. I'm the router. It's okay. Just go away. I'm done. Server says to the original server says to the client, here's your real data. And the client goes, those numbers don't line up, and just throws it on the floor. So how easy is this to do in Metasploit? Load the AirPwn module, set your interface, set the response you want to overload it with, and run it. And, oh, look, there is someone looking at the Racket documentation. Yeah, that was my own network doing it against myself, but So that's all you need to do web page hijacking in Metasploit. So what else can we do? We can do match and replace in regex. The response can be full JavaScript files, image replacements, HTML, another arbitrary file. There's a YAML config file where you can do regex matches against specific requests. So you can build lists of known poisonable files like jQuery. It'll automatically generate HTTP headers as needed for arbitrary data you give it. It gives you complete control of the page content, including headers. So what does that get us? That gets us HTTP content replacement. We can control the page DOM. That means we can control your forms, we can control your browser, we control your iframes, we can access anything in the security context of the page we injected code into. So we can replace content. What do we do now? All the sites include a crap ton of shitty little JavaScript helper files. What happens if we replace one of them that the user would never see? I wonder. I mean, obviously CNN needs all those JavaScript files to work, right? So JavaScript fragments, they're really, really attractive to this because the user never sees them. And they get asked for a lot. Like, you load CNN, you're loading 80 JavaScript files. That's a lot of opportunities for us to race that web server. If we miss the first one, I don't think I care. And they build the web page. That means they run in the security domain of the web page. So, rewriting your DOM, the document object model, is programmatic manipulation of the XML that makes up the page. Once we're in the DOM, we can do anything we damn well want. So, you get 2 lines of JavaScript. Find everything that has a div, find things that are named CNN T1 image, and replace them. So what else can we do? How about we regex and rewrite every form to proxy through my server somewhere else, so everything you log into goes through me before it hits the real server? How about we rewrite all the HTTPS links in your page to HTTP, so everything you do and log into is no longer encrypted on your unencrypted Wi-Fi network, which means I can now sniff it directly? How about poison something topical to a conference? I mean, kind of tinfoil hat, but what if you're at a banking conference and poison all the news sites so that they start saying something in the market crashed? Good stuff. So, HTTP, forget the S. The S isn't important. Find everything that's an A. Find everything that has an href. Look for, and just do a JavaScript or a regex replace. Anything that begins with an HTTPS now has an HTTP. That website is no longer encrypted for any future links. So this matters a lot. I mean, really, really, seriously, bad. So who's read our Snakes VPN paper from about 1.5 years ago? 1, 2. So, short version of it. You can tell I guessed that response because I have the summary in here. You can attack HTTP clients via cache control. Layer 2 attacks against web content can be made persistent. That means once you leave the Starbucks network, you're still owned when you go back into your corporate network. So browsers have cache. Cache sticks around. That's why it's there. Users don't know about cache. If I own your TCP session, I own your cache control. So I feed you a spiked JavaScript file with the cache set to 10 years. That stays on your hard drive. Every time you go back to the site, it reloads that from your VPN, from your corporate office, from wherever. So, don't think that's a problem. There's 490K of JavaScript cached by CNN's front page alone. So, none of the JavaScript files are invisible to the end user. Lots of opportunities to land this attack. So what do? You just make a JavaScript file, feed it to Airpone, cache control, max age, whole bunch of 9s, just lean on the key till you feel like it. Public cache, that's fine. It expires, 2011. It's far out. I mean, the world's going to end in 2012 anyway, so 2011 is good enough. So we hijack a common JavaScript file, spike it with malicious code, set it to cache, and now when the user goes back to work and goes to Twitter again, they're loading our JavaScript instead, and it'll keep reusing it over and over again. So what can we do with that? I don't know. What do you feel like doing? Iframes in the background? Those are fun. Kaminsky's socket sucket stuff from Lorkhan a couple years ago, where he implemented TCP over JavaScript and AJAX and serialized raw TCP data so that he could use bugs in Flash and Java to create local sockets and proxy an interface from his laptop through your browser through AJAX requests out into your internal network. Yeah, you could load that. That would be nice and easy to do. But I mean, no one would ever go to Twitter at work, right? So you don't have to worry about this. None of your users would go to Starbucks and then goof off at work later. And how many sites use Urchin? Google Analytics? Yeah. Most of them are hosted off the same URL at Google? Yeah. What happens if we poison that URL and set it to cache? Yeah, we'd get JavaScript execution on every site loading Urchin from Google. So how about we call home to mom? Cache every modified JavaScript so that it calls home every time the page is visited and contacts a remote server. Maybe there's no good attacks for the browsers this week, but I'm traveling anyway, so, set up a whole bunch of caches. Wait for browser ODay to come out, flip the switch, put a little bit of JavaScript on the server that they'd include dynamically when the cached content loads, that then loads the latest Flash exploit or the PDF exploit in an iframe in the background and owns them. Every system that has the cached call home is attacked as soon as the users visit the site I poisoned, like, say, Twitter, CNN, whatever. Or just make a little JavaScript shim. Cache every page that you see with a little shim that looks at the URL that it was trying to go to, fetches the original content over AJAX, manipulates the DOM to do anything you want to it, like replace images, rewrite encryption, proxy forms, maybe load your PDF exploits, and then, just kind of loads the page up so everything looks normal. But, I mean, there haven't been any big browser vulnerabilities lately, right? I mean, nothing like happened in China or, no problems like that. So this means no website is innocent. Websites that didn't ask for logins that you'd think you'd trust, like just reading Twitter without logging in, still just as likely to feed you a bunch of exploits and own you now as a site you thought was high risk to log into from an open network, like, say, Chase Banking. Any website can be poisoned with browser-owning code. But SSL will solve it, right? Well, not really, because users still have to be smart enough not to accept a bad cert. And users would never do something insecure, right? Obviously, that pop star sent me naked pictures of her. She wants me to see her. She wouldn't have emailed me otherwise. Click, 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 click. So, I mean, users, they're smart, right? You wouldn't expect them to, make bad decisions about malware and viruses and SSL certificates. And you can totally trust them to appropriately look at the SSL certificate and realize that that's a spoofed one, right? I mean, but self-signed certificates, they're so obvious, right? I mean, signed by VeriSign with a capital S obviously isn't signed by VeriSign with a lowercase s, right? Oh. Assuming a user even looks and doesn't just click OK, I kind of think that users just really want the web, click OK until they get to tits. Is it porn yet? No. OK. Is it porn yet? No. OK. Is it porn yet? No. OK. Oh, it finally got porn. Good. Uneducated users will always find a way to expose themselves, but we're all smart hackers. We're fine, right? Unfortunately, Moxie's not around this morning, but at Black Hat last summer, he did the SSL nobite attack, which, short version, SSL certs validated for HTTP by matching the common name. Wildcards are allowed, so like Google purchases splat.google.com. C-strings are terminated with a null byte. You trusted CA validated foo.com before giving out the cert. CA only gives out certs for owners of a domain. What if we get them to sign for a domain we own legitimately, splat null foo.com? And what if their signing code uses the SSL field length and checks all the bytes? And what if Microsoft's SSL code uses C strings and goes, oh, that's a null byte, I should stop comparing? Yeah, that was Moxie's stuff from Black Hat, and yes, it worked that simple, and yes, we all would have been owned, because not only Microsoft, the Firefox libraries, I believe the Opera libraries, several others, OpenSSL had to release fixes for it as well. All your SSL would be owned, and you'd never know, and we're the smart people that can't, and even then we would have gotten screwed. So other things that use SSL might be vulnerable too, anything that had a common name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So sure, that bug is fixed, but what about the next one? Even we can fall to O-Day. Nothing's going to stop a Firefox O-Day from getting you at a con, or at Starbucks, or at the airport. I mean, how often do we use public Wi-Fi? At this point, I've ruined public Wi-Fi for myself, but... So, let's be clever. I'm smart. I use a VPN, or I'm a smart network administrator. I force all my users to use a VPN via like UAC or something, and they all want to set fire to my office, but it's cool because they're still secure. So none of these attacks will work against me. Well, it wouldn't, except your browser has no friggin' concept that you're on a VPN versus a public network. So what was cached in an insecure domain will very happily be loaded inside a secure domain. Which means many hotspots have a landing page where you have to go, yes, Panera, I agree to your network terms, or yes, Starbucks, let me in. Most of those pages aren't encrypted. Unencrypted page on an open network. Oh, look, that's a nice hijack target. So if I control your web page before you log in on your VPN, then I can control your browser. Pop under windows, iframes, AJAX queries in the background that go nowhere. All of those let me pick, say, top 250 pages I think you're going to go to, and cache them and load them in the background, and cache poison them by TCP hijacking your background loads. And you'll never see the page, you'll never know it, but while you're saying to Panera, yes, I won't look at kitty porn, I'm saying to you, oh, here, go visit CNN later, it'll be awesome. And even better, we can make that JavaScript really smart. I can have the poisoned landing page request that content multiple times in the background. I can do regexes in JavaScript against the code I got over AJAX, so I can make sure that my attack landed and the session got hijacked, because I know what the attack code looks like in the hijacked session, and if it didn't land, I can keep requesting it in the background quickly to make sure it'll finally hit. So now I can arbitrarily own sites I think you're going to go to before you load your VPN. So let's take it one step further. VPN loads internal pages, right? And if I control layer 2, can I attack other protocols other than TCP? Yeah, I could race the DNS server. Just get a query, set the QR flag on it, supply an IP, race your local DNS server to give you a response back. So that means, oh look, DNS pwn's now in Metasploit. Same model as AirPwn, YAML file, config file to match multiple queries, races the DNS server to give the user a customized IP. It's customized for your pleasure. It's good. So if we control the browser, we control DNS resolution, we can retry as quickly as we want if anything fails. What stops us from guessing, hey, I wonder if your internal site's named intranet. Let's start loading that in the background. Yeah, nothing stops us from doing that. How about I cache some JavaScript for the intranet URL in your browser that when you log in over the VPN, loads the cache stuff, then crawls the DOM of all your intranet pages over AJAX and ships them all off to me outside the company. Or just rewrites all your DOM so all your login forms proxy outside your company first. Sure, you go to log in and it fails, but I have your password. Browsers are great. They cache everything, because the speed of the user experience is the biggest problem. So let's cache DNS in the browser too. Yeah, Firefox does that, IE does that. It's great. So what does that mean? I could poison your DNS pre-VPN in such a way that will stick in your browser post-VPN, so that, you know, say I don't land the cache attack on intranet, but now I can make intranet go to a public IP I control. Sure, you might not attempt to go to it before you load your VPN, but it'll still work anyway. So what else has cache? Fun fact, Flash maintains its own cache. Even when you clear the browser cache, your Flash cache is probably still kicking around. Trust me, it's cool. Flash file. So, you know, got mobile convergence now. So we're all set, right? We're safe. We can just use our iPhones. Smartphones are really just general purpose computers. They're running Safari and Firefox and WebKit. They've got lower bandwidth networks. What does that imply? That implies your iPhone and your Android phone are really, really happy to cache data because they don't want to use your cell plan. Of course, they're all on cell networks, right? So you can just use 3G. You'll be perfectly safe. You can't see me on 3G. Okay, yeah. In most cases, you're right. You can't sniff 3G. Normal people can't. So that's true, but, you know, not like there'd ever be any problems with 3G service that would cause you to go back to Wi-Fi. I mean, it's always reliable. Besides, smartphone users are used to going to Wi-Fi. You might even prefer it. You got lower power requirements, more speed, you don't have your cell phone data limits. Besides, why not help them along? No, of course you shouldn't order this from Taiwan. That would be illegal, and someone trying to own your company would never do something illegal for $26. So how many of your users or executives carry smartphones between offices and airports? Who knows how to clear the browser cache on an iPhone? I mean, I've forgotten because I don't have one, but I looked it up. You can do it. A hammer. Crowbar. It's a multitasking tool. You can use the crowbar on the hacker and on the iPhone. So what else can we do to layer 2? Well, DHCP is a pretty nice target. Smart AP can filter DHCP to authorized servers only if on a deployed network. But if we're talking directly to the client, it doesn't matter if the AP is smart enough to filter things. We can just feed them DHCP responses that give them our own DNS server or our own router that then feeds them back into the network legitimately after customization. Man-in-the-middle routing, you could proxy, you could spoof NIS login stuff, you could do NetBIOS stuff. Yeah, that all works. We can also do other fun tricks, like we can append to TCP streams. What does an HTTP stream look like? Handshaky stuff, HTTP 200, blah, blah, blah. You go, oh, I lost a line in that. So you go, get something, and it goes, response okay, here's your headers, here's a new line, here's your data, here's a FIN packet that ends the connection. What happens if we beat that FIN packet with a TCP hijack? We now control the socket as long as we want. Fun fact, Firefox and IE really don't care if the HTTP content length header doesn't match how much data they read. They also really don't care if you put script after HTML, which means I can tail append to unencrypted web pages arbitrarily and then rewrite them with JavaScript to what I want. You can defeat server filters by appending conflicting content onto them. You could also Trojan stuff being uploaded by the user to the company network by appending content to the end of the stream. So like the GIFAR attack, jar is a zip, which reads from the end of the file. GIF is an image, which reads from the front of the file. You can cat the two of them together. It looks like a GIF, it displays like a GIF, it unzips like a jar. The exact behavior on how that's going to work depends on the browser, but it means we can sneak interesting content in that your browser may interpret in ways you didn't expect and that the remote site didn't expect. Beating the FIN is really hard to do. It only works about 8% of the time. It makes HTTP 1.1 with multiple requests per TCP session really, really mad at you because it all kind of falls apart and then it hangs. But it's okay, and we can't control the caching. But still, for work sometimes, 8%, that's not a bad return for just sitting there letting a script run. So, but I'm encrypted. Yeah, that's nice. Lorkhan doesn't support injecting on WEP or WPA yet. It will. WEP is trivial. One key is used for every user on the network. WPA is slightly less trivial, but WPA PSK with a known PSK is no good. Lots of cons do this. They go, it's WPA, it's good. Well, it's better than WEP. We'll leave it at better than WEP. So it uses one shared secret, used a computer per user key on join, which is great, except if we know the PSK, we watch the user join, and we watch the secrets exchange, and we know how the secrets exchange was built. The only reason it's really still okay is because there's no tools that do it yet, so hopefully that'll get fixed. So future plans with that, better Metasploit integration, so all the other layer 2 hijacking stuff that's in Metasploit for wired stuff, we can move right over. Dynamic content generation based on target. It's Ruby. Let's leverage the fact that we can dynamically create custom exploits for whatever they're trying to load and integrate it with browser autopwn. There's also with Lorkhan lots of opportunities for fuzzing. There's already a semi-continual flow of driver bugs. They dried up for a little bit, but I think they're going to show up again because for some reason people think, oh, the spec says it's only 32 bytes for the network name. No one would ever send more than 32 bytes in that field that supports 256, right? 802.11 is just getting nastier and nastier with variable length nested fields. So you've got beacons with variable length tagged fields that contain headers that then define variable length tagged fields in a tagged field. Are we 3 layers down yet, Josh? Yeah. So if we're not there yet, we will be soon. That there's a tagged field and a tagged field that has tagged fields inside of it that are variable length arbitrary data. It's great. The Lorkhan packet forge code really simplifies packet building. You can just kind of go add this, add this, add this, add this, add this, turn it into a bunch of RAM, and you get back a struct. That's your 802.11 packet for injection. It's really super hard to detect these attacks because I'm not spoofing an AP. Most IDS systems go, I've seen 14 beacons. There's one AP, and I know it only beacons 10 times a second. What's going on? Or that's a MAC address I don't control. Why is it acting like my network? Or why is that signal strength all wacky? That AP isn't where it looks like it is. What's going on? Etc. So to spot these attacks, the IDS system has to know every packet being sent on the network to be able to spot 10 data packets that it didn't originate. And it must be able to see the packet in the air because you're going from your Wi-Fi card to their Wi-Fi card, completely bypassing the network. So that assumes the IDS can even see it. How about I take a highly directional Yagi and set my card to 1 milliwatt and sit over there and aim it at Nick. An AP over there isn't going to see it because it's whisper quiet. The IDS has no chance for wireless. The wired IDS is never even going to see the packets. They might see some of the results of, oh, there was a stray fin that came through, but they don't know. Clients suck. Clients freak out all the time and drop connections. So I don't think one fin packet is going to be spottable by a wired IDS on a large network. So we've more or less figured out how to defend access points. It's really impossible to defend clients when they go wandering off into the world on insecure access points. So if you're using an open network, sites you think you trust, you can't. Spiked attacks will stay resident in your browser. You or your users might be bringing something nasty back to your corporate network with you that you didn't plan on. This is bad even for us. I think people that aren't at HackerCons don't stand a freaking chance at spotting this happening to them. You may already be screwed. I said this would be depressing. I've ruined open Wi-Fi for myself. I can't play on Wi-Fi anymore. To fix it, use a VPN. It's a start. If you're really careful, which we can be, you can use a separate account for clicking on agreements and only use a browser through a trusted connection like a VPN. So your primary browser only ever goes through an encrypted connection, period, no matter what, things like that. That's really hard for most users. It's kind of tricky even for us to remember all the time. It's hard to enforce. You can't enforce that on a corporate network on your users that say you have to use this web browser only sometimes. Users don't like things that stand between them and porn. You can do SSH SOCKS tunneling. It's basically a VPN. You can mandate updates. Easier said than enforced, depending on your infrastructure. You can forbid users from taking laptops onto open networks. That works really well if you can pull it off. Policy, summary firings and executions of users who violate the policy, UAC control pushed over your network infrastructure. Don't give them laptops that you allow them to bring into the company. I mean, yeah, that'll work great if you can do it. It would be nice to say, move to WPA. Well, WPA PSK, it's better. It's not really a solution. WPA EAP, so doing per user authentication, that's great, because even with the same username or password, you just guest over WPA EAP, you get per user keying. That means it doesn't matter that I know your username and password. All that does is let me log in. It doesn't let me see your traffic. So that's great, but that requires SSL. And if the cert is signed by a common certificate authority, then I can just go get a cert by the same certificate authority, like VeriSign or whatever, and bring up a spoofed AP and capture all your traffic and session hijack you the same way at Starbucks or whatever. If it's signed by a self-signed CA, the user has to accept a self-signed CA, which means they have to look at it and determine that that information is valid, which means I can look at it and make one that looks exactly the same, except those squiggly numbers underneath are different. So it's up to the user to determine validity, and now we're back to users are dumb. They're not going to really determine validity that well. So it's really hard to deploy secure public networks. Some vendors try to solve it with custom clients, like Verizon has started partnering with other companies to get like Boingo hotspot access, but you can only use it with their Windows client on Windows, and not on Windows 7, I think, and etc. So, and that then means you're running foreign binaries. Yay! I'm running something as administrator that controls my system. Hope Verizon didn't F up. So there's not a fantastic solution yet. You can manually enforce security domains, use different browsers for login. You can manually clear cache. I don't like that option because that means the exploits and whatnot are still hitting your system. You're just hopefully clearing them out before they really screw you. That doesn't make me happy. You can turn off cache, but then you better make sure you always close your browser, because if you opened it at Starbucks and left it open and went back to the office, then it's probably cached in RAM, even if you don't cache to disk. It's still scary. You forget once, you're screwed. I don't like those options. So, yay, depression. Everybody go drink at lunch. So thanks to RSnake, HDM, Toast, Renderman, Jesse Burns, anyone else I forgot to add to the talk. And I don't even know what time it is. Wow, that went quick. But if anyone has any questions, or just wants to chat about it off of camera or whatever, but. The question was SOCs over SSH, any upcoming concerns? If SSH gets broken, we're all effed deeply and profoundly. No, I think more of SOCs in the browser. I do it. I mean, so if you set the browser to do SOCs. Okay, so one thing you have to worry about is Flash does not obey your browser SOCs settings. Fun fact, which is why the Torify stuff, or for Linux there's tsocks, and I think it's socks wrapper, which use a little LD preload shim that shim out the GCC or the libc connect functions and replace them with custom code that does socks. So you do that, and you can make any program SOCs compatible. So you should be able to make Firefox and Flash use SOCs no matter what if you shim them that way so that Flash's connect syscalls don't happen. But no, in general, SOCs to localhost to SSH tunnel is how I run everything. It works great because you're only going to localhost and your browser. You gotta make assumptions. You assume that your browser obeys SOCs and that there's no way for JavaScript to turn that off. I've never heard of an attack that does that, but if you want to be complete, think about it. I mean, it's a risk. But yeah, assuming there's no vulnerability in the application that allows them to bypass SOCs, and that would assume that there's a way to get that exploit landed on your application in the first place, because if you're going through SOCs and I'm sitting next to you hijacking your sessions, I'm not going to see your SOCsified session, so it would be hard for me to land that attack against you in the first place. It's one of those things where you gotta have to decide this laptop is insecure enough to take to public networks, and then you do what you feel is safe to do on them with the protections you have. If anyone ever busts SSH, we're all deeply and profoundly screwed in ways that it's not even, we're done. I mean, Debian and Ubuntu already did that to us to some extent, but. For anybody who didn't get the reference, a couple years ago, Debian changed something in OpenSSL that caused it to not have entropy, that caused it to, instead of being 63 bits of random data, it was 65,000 numbers, and that was it, which meant all your SSH was decryptable. So, and that was in there for like 6 years.
You're talking about layer 2 control, whether you're using a IPsec VPN or a VPN for the back, right?
Yeah, the question was IPsec versus SSL for the layer 2 stuff for VPN. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Anything that shields you in a non-trivial way from someone on the open Wi-Fi near you seeing your TCP sessions. And really, you should minimize anything that comes out of your laptop unencrypted anyway. I mean, you really don't want people seeing your Gmail or whatever your web stuff is unencrypted anyway, even if the site's unencrypted. So.
I would say you probably need for IPsec, just you're not using SSL as your.
I use SSH for everything, but I don't manage users. So, personally, I use an SSH tunnel to a semi-trusted system that's at least more trusted than my Wi-Fi connection, and then tunnel everything through that with SOCKS and SSH tunneling, and then I use whatever application crypto on top of the SOCKS SSH tunnel to protect the data from that point on. But again, that's not a real good solution for users on your network. It's good for us. Yeah, unless you could script it somehow. You could, yeah. But again, you still have the problem of dealing with making them not use the same browser for browsing and agreeing to network agreements. I mean, if you wanted to go all out, you'd use a whole bunch of VMs and then composite the windows onto one with like NX or something, and then, but. Any other questions? Come on, Josh, you gotta have something. All right. I guess that's it.